Know thyself, said a Greek philosopher 3,000 years ago. In 1970, his mandate was updated by an American psychologist who said, "Disclose yourself, and you will know yourself." How do we arrive at disclosing ourselves? How do we put into words sorrow and pain, our innermost thoughts and feelings? How do we gain someone who will listen yet refrain from judgment? I turned to a number of writers for the answer. Jeffrey Berman was one of them. As a young man, Berman suffered the suicide of a college friend, a tragedy for which he was altogether unprepared. Later, as professor in the English department of SUNY Albany, he determined to teach literature with an eye to survival, including writers who were clinically depressed or who killed themselves. Surviving literary suicide was one of his courses. Another was literature and psychoanalysis. Then Berman designed courses that would encourage writing students to self-disclose, a skill they'd find useful for the rest of their lives. He may have reasoned, had his friend been able to speak of his despair or write him about it, the self-destruction might have been avoided. Berman's book, Risky Writing, Self-Disclosure and Self-Transformation in the Classroom, describes the assignments he created and his students' responses. I was so enthusiastic about his technique, I entered into email exchanges with the author. In 2000, having obtained an advance copy of Risky Writing, I composed a dissertation on the Berman method. I was well past 50 when my dissertation was published. To self-disclose, we must let go of our secrets. Keeping secrets make us feel ashamed, isolated, and rejected. As a young woman, I was too ashamed to confess that my mother's death freed me, not just from the tyranny of her wrathful outbursts, but to follow my interests in languages, leave Germany and work in France, and a few years later, emigrate to California. I was even more ashamed of our contentious relationship while she lived. Dad was unreachable. He'd survived 5 years in a Nazi war and 4 more in a Soviet prison camp. Mother used to grab me by my braids, shake me like a rabbit, fling me against cupboard and stove, and screamed, "You are the nail in my coffin." Other times she'd tell me she would die young, of cancer, as had been the fate of her mother. At 14, I ran off in suicidal despair to get rid of my braids. Ever since that day, 1955, my hair has been short. When Mother died 4 years later, I was 18, my brothers were 16, 9, and 4. I hid the adverse experiences of my childhood and adolescence for many years, a skeleton in the closet that controlled my life, as in, I have my secrets and my secrets have me. I felt burdened with a double whammy. As nail in her coffin, I was guilty of our mother's early demise, and I deprived my young brothers of maternal care, which I could not give them. Ditching the mask is what happens in psychotherapy. Unfortunately, it is often accompanied by the resistance to disclose our innermost thoughts. Self-disclosing talk and writing asks that we bare our souls. We confess shameful, painful memories. Surprisingly, we often discover that bringing these skeletons out into the light allows for healing encounters. The conversations expand our universe and render us authentic. We become unafraid of our vulnerabilities. When we read memoirs that disclose how others have dealt with the effects of trauma, we absorb the strategies these writers have used to overcome adversity. An encounter group my husband and I joined as young parents put me on the path toward self-awareness. The group consisted of 4 couples and our pastor as leader. Initially, we filled out personality inventories that went to a computer for analysis. Every other week, our pastor handed each of us a computerized slip of paper alerting us to something that needed attention, which often led one or the other of us to exclaim, "That's not me! The computer made the mistake!" Only to hear a spouse's retort, "Oh yes, that's you." Once our pastor handed me a message that read, "You suppress all emotion except rage, and even rage remains partially suppressed. Ask God to help you accept all your feelings: love, jealousy, sadness, joy, rage." I realized my stunted emotions kept me from loving my family. The year was 1969, and I was 28. My husband battled ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, of his own. Only once, Daryl acknowledged to me that he was an unwanted pregnancy, and his mother let him know it. At 6, a case of polio left him with atrophied leg and damaged spine, which necessitated his lifelong use of crutches. His mother, like mine, died of cancer when he was 18. When we married, he worked as missile engineer and attended law school at night. Unlike me, he disliked reading, so I read him his law books out loud when our baby slept. Edith Eva Eger is a Holocaust survivor who speaks unabashedly of her unresolved grief and rage. Her book introduces us to people who suffered great pain and injustice, yet rose to stand tall. She speaks of Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl as her late-in-life mentor. Her disclosures taught me that, quote, "the opposite of depression is expression." We live with overwhelming rage when burdened with unresolved grief, Eger explains. She would know. She struggled for decades with grief, survivor's guilt, and the rage that comes with it. Quote, "More than 30 years of silenced ghosts come roaring out. I feel the force of the rage, and it doesn't kill me after all," Eger writes of a therapy session. Her memoir, which she published at close to 90, was followed by The Gift, 12 Lessons to Save Your Life, a book that helped me come to grips with the grief and rage over Mother's years of dying. Berman, like Eger, values self-disclosure. Both suffered vexing personal tragedies, yet they model good writing and reading. Besides, Berman's prompts are pertinent to mature adults no less than to students. Risky talking and writing, along with selective reading, transformed my adult life without the benefit of psychotherapy. And so I invite anyone who has suffered ACEs or adult tragedy or trauma to practice self-disclosing talk and, if possible, risky writing. Once we permit ourselves to do this, we attain empathetic listeners and readers. Changing our conversations brings with it good listening habits. We practice active listening. We listen with the third ear by remaining quiet and patient. We toss out the temptation to fix things for the other. Changing our reading material also brings new habits. Social media overload, it soon becomes a thing of the past. Yet the new readings are not that daunting. Today's library cards allow visits to virtual libraries to check out online books. Instead of spending our commutes listening to talking heads, we choose audiobooks to accompany us to work or school. Risk is essential to growing. Panic and anxiety need not lead to despair. Around the corner lies growth, renewed vigor, fresh insight, and a sense that life is good. Go for it. Here are Berman's assignments adapted for individuals or groups. Begin by sketching a chronology of 10 important events in your life, from birth to present, each event comprising 1 or 2 paragraphs. Simultaneously, a spouse, friend, cousin, or trusted other becomes your learning partner, who composes a similar chronology. You and your learning partner exchange chronologies. Each picks up one event from the other's write-up and interviews her or him for further detail. From this, each of you composes 2 pages of writing. Now, read and discuss a memoir. Memoirists are insightful and self-aware, even as they disclose experiences that include pain and sorrow. They allow their readers glimpses of enhanced lives. Someday soon, you'll find my memoir on the shelves of your bookstore or library. Until then, I suggest Edith Eger's The Promise, Embrace the Possible, and Stephanie Fu, What My Bones Know, a memory of healing from complex trauma. You and your learning partner may read different memoirs purchased or checked out from the library, or both of you may read the same book. After discussing what you learned from your reading, both of you repeat the writing exercise. This time, you'll seek to produce an entire essay about a traumatic event in the other's life. You or your learning partner may have experienced a loss, a family tragedy, a disturbing health diagnosis. Be courageous in your sharing. In listening, validate. Remind yourself, don't try to solve, to fix things. In the Berman classroom, with permission from the writers and their subjects, the teacher reads each essay to the class. In a group, the leader will do likewise. Individuals who practice the exercise with a learning partner may locate an audience for their write-ups within the family, in a church group, or at a community venue.